The following episode will contain spoilers. You have been warned.
You're listening to Cinema IRL, the podcast that throws you into the movie and asks the question, what would you do? Why is it that animated films with no dialogue seem to be so good? No words, no problem. Amber and Scott can still discuss what we would do in a post-apocalyptic flooded world after watching Flow. And now, Cinema IRL.
I wish I could switch places for just one day.
What would you do?
Put yourself in my shoes.
How do we handle this?
What would you do?
Put yourself in my position.
What would you do?
Now it's your turn.
And the moral of the story is, be careful who you help because they might steal your fish and break your mirror.
That's true. I don't know if that's truly the moral of the story here, but we will dig into your theory.
Well, that's what I got.
All right, folks. So this episode, we are talking about the film Flow. Flow is, let's see, hang on. Lost my spot here, folks. Okay. Flow. Only vestiges of the human world exist when a great flood puts Cat in great danger. But a boat and a bevy of different creatures means that they must all work together to survive the brave and scary new world in Flow. And as I was looking for the description of this film, pardon me, folks, that's why I lost my train of thought there because I was looking at something different. Anyway, I discovered some other description of it, which I thought was really interesting, and it's not where my mind went, but I totally realized that this is the undertone. So when you're talking about moral of the story, this part of movie description that I found says it's a movie about the damaging effects of climate change and how it's wreaking havoc on our natural world. And
I mean, that's a stretch. I mean,
no, well,
I get it, but it's not telling you anything about climate change.
Okay,
like, this
hang
movie
on.
has nothing to do with
Can
climate
I
change.
finish my sentence? Damaging effects, climate change is wreaking on our natural world due to its focus on the animal kingdom and how animals adapt to man-made catastrophe as humanity is kept out of frame. And that's really is what happened here. So the film, it's an animated film, and it starts with just following the antics of a cat, and you see dogs, and you see deer and moose and all kinds of creatures. And then all of a sudden, everyone starts running in the opposite direction.
And by the way, that is a sign. If ever you see all the animals running in one direction, you should be too.
You run with them, absolutely. And then there is a monstrous wave of water.
Like a tsunami.
Yeah, absolutely, just of epic proportion. And very quickly, all the land is submerged with the tallest of treetops sticking out the top. And slowly but surely, even those trees getting submerged. And I didn't make the connection with climate change, but after reading that description, it's actually a really interesting perspective because human beings make all of these actions, but the natural world, the animal kingdom, they're just forced to always adapt to the chaos that humans create.
Yeah.
I love this film. I really, really enjoy this film. And it was just like Robot Dreams, which was another animated film in the respect that there were no words.
Yeah, Robot Dreams actually had words. It had no dialogue. This has no words and no dialogue.
Well, Robot Dreams had music. It had a
Yes.
couple things of music to it. But yeah, there was no dialogue. But this didn't have any dialogue.
Yeah, zero words were spoken the entire movie.
And yet you follow the story, and it was compelling and beautiful and moving, and I loved this film.
I think you loved it more than I did. I did like it. It was a refreshing change of pace. I'm not necessarily going to run out and tell all my friends and family that they must see it, but I mean, as far as movies go, it's in the top half. Like, I'd say it's better than average.
Yeah, and so we go throughout the film and we see a boat, and the cat sees this boat out in the distance as he is now at the top of this tallest statue in the land and is on the verge of getting submerged again because the water's getting higher and higher. And he sees this boat, jumps in the boat, and it turns out there's a capybara in the boat.
Cappy.
And this boat is the only refuge for these animals who then later on through the trip and the rising water, they take on a lemur.
Wait, are you telling me that there's a thing where there's a huge, giant flood, and the only thing that's available to keep these animals safe is a boat?
Yes.
Was it Ark-like at all?
It was not.
Okay.
No, also not Arc-like like the theater. So I don't know if everyone has an Arc-like theater near them. That might not make any sense.
Where's my
Yeah.
sound effect?
So they take on a dog and a lemur and ultimately a large bird that defends the cat. And this menagerie is navigating, living on this small boat, as there is no land in sight, there is no food in sight, and there's little animal sounds grunting here and there, but it is so enjoyable to watch this story unfold with no dialogue.
By the way, this is about 45 seconds too late, but found it. Actually, I didn't.
That's great.
I realize if you have the volume off, you don't hear it.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, that was well earned. Well deserved. Okay. So for what we do here and what would you do? I think one of the primary undertones of this film was community coming together, really, because this capybara just lets on the cat, and then they end up taking on this lemur who has a collection of stuff in a basket, which he's very possessive about, and ultimately on the boat he finds a mirror, which he's fascinated with, looking at himself in the mirror, which is what you were talking about earlier on.
Here's the question, though. When the cappy drags the basket to the boat,
Mm-hmm.
is he doing it because he wants the stuff in the basket, or is he doing it because he thinks the lemur will come along if he steals the basket, knowing that the lemur needs to come along, or else he's going to be in trouble?
I don't know. That's a good question. You'd have to ask the capybara.
He was unavailable for comment.
And then they end up taking on this dog, and then for a short time, they take on 3 other dogs who create some havoc, and then those 3 dogs are kind of selfish and run off later in the film. But the
Those
core,
dogs are assholes.
But the core group of the one dog, the cat, the lemur, the capybara, and the bird go through a lot, and living on this small boat. And I think it's an interesting idea to explore of when times are tough and you've got to come together and coexist in peace and serving the greater good.
Well, I think there's another theme that one won't think about in this, and that is that when times are tough for most people,
Mm-hmm.
usually there's still a subsection of the population that's actually doing even better. Hence the Leviathan, that now was not just restricted to the oceans, it literally could go everywhere because everywhere was an ocean.
So that's what that whale-like creature was?
I have it as a Leviathan. That thing was way larger than a whale, and I believe that's a Leviathan.
So yes, as they are navigating the waters, going through cities and forests and whatnot, everything on land, there is this magnificent aquatic creature that is swimming by and jumping and leaping.
Yeah, that thing was like if Godzilla humped a blue whale.
Okay.
And that's what it would produce.
Okay. So yeah, that's actually really interesting what you just said. Not what you just said, but what you said before the humping.
Because once everything got better for everyone else, it was the end for the Leviathan.
Yeah.
Who got kind of caught out of place.
Toward the end of the film, the water does start going down, and unfortunately, it does trap the marine animal, landlocked, dying on the land in a forest, unable to get back to the water, which was really sad to see.
It was especially sad for the cat.
Yeah.
Because despite the fact that this thing is monstrous and scare the piss out of anyone, even though it was probably unintentional. The Leviathan saved the cat's life when he was drowning by coming up with the cat over him.
Yeah, when the creature surfaced, the cat was on his back. So yeah, he didn't drown. It was, go ahead.
That's right. It also reminds us when the cat is looking at this Leviathan. I mean, he's like on land, nowhere near water.
And can't be saved.
I mean, thousands of times heavier than this cat. There's no way. The cat's just looking like, I want to help you so bad. I would do anything to help you right now. There's nothing I can do. And that is a horrible feeling.
Well, and prior to that, the group had just united to come together to help save the capybara and the cat who had gotten in danger trying to save the capybara. So the group had just united to save them. So they were all together, and for a moment they were celebrating, and then the cat ran down the path and found the other animal.
Except for the 3 damn dogs.
Yeah, they were not helpful. But
yeah,
but
oh,
what the one
look,
dog
it's a
was-
bunny. Let's stop being useful and chase the bunny.
But the primary dog was extremely loyal.
He was a golden.
And as you know, when I stumbled onto this bit of information about climate change, it really is kind of puts a different spin on this film for me, because I had realized that I had thought that there had been some sort of natural disaster, like, a hurricane or something that created this flooding, but I hadn't thought about the bigger picture of really how when we are not good stewards of the planet, which sadly we're crappy, terrible stewards of the planet, in my opinion, that the natural world that depends on a certain balance, which the world on its own could maintain very easily if it weren't for human interference, and that our reckless or greedy decisions as a human race has profound impact on this planet and the creatures who also call this planet home.
Yeah, it seemed like a tsunami, which told me that it probably was something seismic, some earthquake. But while I feel like and mind you, you should not get your environmental science from me. Like, I know some things, but I'm no Al Gore. So it feels like the way they did it with the rising waters, it seemed like somewhat over time, like this was a polar ice cap melting situation, which, is going to be what probably gets the planet eventually. And
that could certainly create a massive wave if, know.
I don't know. I guess unless something huge broke off.
Yeah.
I would think not, but
there's actually a Q&A with the creator of the film tomorrow, which I would love to see, because I would enjoy hearing more insights as to the motivation and the backstory and what was in mind when this film was created. But back to our what would you do? So you're trying to survive. There's some sort of natural disaster, and you encounter just a hodgepodge crew of people.
Yeah, I don't know what those birds
way.
were. If they were egrets or like giant egrets, I don't know.
But I
think
think
it's
it's
huge.
I think it's one of those times where if there is any sort of disaster, and regardless of what that disaster is, I think generally most people are pretty good about extending their circle of compassion where they might not ordinarily be. And
it absolutely was an egret.
And there's certainly always those folks that get self-centered and stingy and selfish and narrowly focused in disasters of, it's my food or it's my transportation or it's my whatever, and I'm not going to share because I don't know you and I only care about me and mine. But
yeah, there were a lot of unfortunately, this, from a what would you do perspective, I didn't feel like this was necessarily the best movie, but from a what did you learn perspective, I think there were lots of things. I could go over quite a few things, like when the egret, the one smaller egret, like stood up for the cat.
Right.
And got the shit beat out of him for it.
Right, because one of the big egrets had actually snatched the cat off the ground and was flying with him to take him away, and then the cat struggled and then managed to get away, plummeted down to the ground, actually landing in the boat. But when they were coming after him again, as you say, the small egret basically stood between the large egret and the cat and said no, and they fought, and then they stood on his beak and stood on his wing and hurt his wing, and then they went off and abandoned him.
I mean, the egret became the de facto parent of the group, who was doing for the crew not necessarily what they wanted, but what they needed. And often the kids would try to make the egret do other things, and the egret would have none of it until they wanted to go get the dogs, and then they did that.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think if you were trapped on a boat with 4 other people, I don't think all of you could get along as well as these animals did.
Oh, and it's not like they got along perfectly.
No,
there was plenty of hissing and snarling.
Yeah.
Over time. I mean, it wasn't. They didn't get like into full on. Well, they didn't usually get into full on fights. When the egret kicked the ball off the boat, that lemur got pretty pissed.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I definitely hope folks see this film. It was very thought provoking at several different levels, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be okay with the fact that there's no dialogue.
But it's
and
funny.
It's a greater picture type movie.
I laughed more in this film than I do most comedies.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment to you about that. I think you laughed more at this film than possibly any film we've gone to.
Yeah, and we certainly see air quotes here comedies, but yeah, it was beautiful in its simplicity and very amusing and comical at times. And I think if you open yourself up to an experience like Flow, I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
I mean, I'm going to be real honest, and this may not be a popular thing to say. If you're dumb, you're not going to get the movie. Like, you're just not going to get it. Like, you're not going to see the greater, bigger picture. You're gonna got to have a little bit of intelligence behind you to see the things and see not just what the story is showing you, but what the story is telling you, because it doesn't actually tell you. Like, you have to infer and you have to read between the lines a lot on this. So if you're that person who likes to read between the lines, you'll actually really enjoy it. If you're dumb, well, why are you listening to us? Like, that actually doesn't make a lot of sense. But thank you. But you can skip that one.
Okay, so I don't know how to follow that up, but Flow, definitely one of my favorite films we've seen here over the last year and a half, and I don't know, maybe I'm gonna sneak into the theater tomorrow to see the Q&A with the film creator.
And they're all lucky they didn't get 7 years bad luck for breaking that damn mirror.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you for listening. And to catch all the new episodes, please subscribe. We release 2 to 3 episodes weekly, so we'll have new content regularly. Until next time.